Hello and welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop. This time round we're focusing on a bit of a gem from the 1970s, a car that was a joint effort to the point where it's sort of a miracle it's here at all, really, because at every turn it was thwarted. And that car is the BMW M1. Now, BMW in the mid-1970s were looking at Porsche very jealously because they were winning a lot of Group 5 races with their 935, and so BMW decided they wanted a bit of the action too. They were making loads of money with sales of the 3 and 5 series. The 6 and 7 series were about to come on stream. All very, very good drivers' cars, front engine, rear wheel drive. They called them at the time the ultimate driving machine, and you know, they could lay claim to being some of the most enjoyable cars to drive on the road because they were the classic front engine rear wheel drive layout. Of course, most cars nowadays are front wheel drive or even four wheel drive, but things were very different then. And the joy of that is that you can balance the car on the throttle and it all just drives really nicely. But BMW broke the mold with this. They realised that if they wanted to go racing to try and get into Group 5 and win it against their arch rival Porsche by this time, they wanted to start with a clean sheet. So they came up with the fact that, first of all, the car had to be mid-engined, and up until the i8, this is the only mid-engined BMW ever built. Quite astounding, really, but they stuck to that recipe of front-engine rear-wheel drive so much. Obviously, it changed over the years, but by this time, that was it. That was all they had. And they decided to concept this car around that. It had to be a racing car if it was going to win races. So they went to Lamborghini in Sant'Agata Bolognese in Italy, and they had a word with the brilliant Gianpaolo Dallara and other people at Lamborghini, and he designed the chassis for this mid-engine car. It's sort of conceptually halfway between a Miura and a Countach chassis. It's box sections, but it's also got bits of space frame in it as well. It's quite an interesting hodgepodge, but it works. Boy, does it work. And BMW came up with the M88-1, 24-valve twin-cam straight-six engine, using the standard cast-iron big block of the bigger straight-six engines, the 3-litre, 3.3, 3.5. And the whole thing came together, or didn't, because Lamborghini came up with the design. Giorgetto Giugiaro designed the body, and it was all done in the sort of Sant'Agata area in northern Italy. Apart from the engine and gearbox, the gearbox is a ZF, standard ZF transaxle. And things started to go wrong when cracks started to appear in Lamborghini, because Lamborghini were in terrible financial trouble in the late 70s. They were being rescued by the local municipality financially, and they could barely just about make Countaches and Silhouettes and Huracos at that time. They were really fighting for survival. So Lamborghini saw this as a lifeline to extra cash. Problem was, it was sort of almost too little too late at the time before the company got restructured and taken over in the late 70s and early 80s. But BMW didn't know that. So it sort of all started to fall apart. Gianpaolo Dallara, as I say, designed a fabulous chassis for it, very much along racing lines. That beautiful twin-cam 4-valve per cylinder straight six sat in the middle, and Italian-styled body. And what ended up happening was the chassis were built by Marchesi, very famous chassis builder in Italy. They built the chassis for the Miura and the Countach and lots of other Italian cars at that time. And then the fiberglass body was bonded over the top of it at another location, 10 kilometers away from the Lamborghini factory, some ex-Lamborghini employees. And then the car went to Germany for trimming and final fettling and to have the engine, etc. put in. I mean, it was a logistical, they probably did more miles traveling around Europe than some of them did in the first 2 years of their lives on the road. But we are where we are. As I say, then what happened was the rules changed because Group 5, which BMW set out to race in, ceased to exist in that form. So then they had to change the car to Group 4. I mean, it was just like working on quicksand, the whole project. To homologate the car, to make it suitable for racing, they had to make 400 of them for road use. They ended up making just over 450, And some of those were racing cars for a one-make series that they did with these cars, which was very successful in 1979. I think Niki Lauda won the 1979 M1 series, if I'm not mistaken. But this car is a really fabulous example of the M1. It's one owner from 6 months old. It had one owner from new to 6 months old, and then the gentleman that we're repairing it for now has had it since it was 6 months old, right through to now. The car has never been restored. It's been very much kept up to speed mechanically, and every last belt, hose, fitting, pipe has been kept. It comes with the car still, but the car is absolutely original. All the paintwork's original, and what could be cooler than a set of original BMW Motorsport stripes, which are slightly worn through with polish? Doesn't get much cooler than that, really. This particular car has only done 20,000 kilometers from new, 12,500 miles. It's not running on all 6 cylinders. It's got a petrol leak, so it's come in for a few bits and bobs. And hopefully we're going to turn this car into something that works properly again and really well. It's interesting because the first time I worked on and drove an M1 was in the early 90s. It was an orange car. They're all left-hand drive, no right-hand drive cars for the UK or anywhere else. And I wasn't ever fantastically impressed with the styling. It looked a bit clunky, and I thought it's only a 3.5 litre engine, straight 6. And the first time I drove one back then, 28 years ago now, I was blown away by it. Some cars really disappoint me. When I drive them, I've had this great big build-up. Oh, I'm really looking forward to this, and then a crushing disappointment. And others I've sort of sidelined and written off in a way. And then you drive them and they just come to life and they completely surprise you. And this falls into the latter category. It's quite an interesting mishmash of Italian and German technology. But all the switchgear, all the interior is very functional. It's very mainline production BMW. They just raided the parts bins off the production line for a lot of the fixtures and fittings. But it's a really interesting curio. It's fitted with Kugelfischer fuel injection, which started out as a lot of mechanical injection systems did, being based on a diesel system. But it works really well. It's got the individual throttle bodies, which every self-respecting boy racer must have on their car these days. Well, hello, this had it in 1977, and it needed it. So it's a really, really good bit of kit. It's not particularly heavy. It's under 1,300 kilos. Fiberglass body. There are a couple of quirks about this car which are quite whimsical or quite interesting or unusual. First one is, and I don't know even how many BMW M1 drivers or owners knew that you could do this, but you've got a tiny little catch here. And if you release that, you've got an access panel into this area here for all the electrical and mechanical gubbins that's under there. Quite funny, really. And the second thing is, it's got 2 badges on the back. BMW are obviously very proud of this car, so they put a BMW badge on the left and a BMW badge on the right, just in case you didn't know. I would particularly like to make special mention of something that I've been sent by Dirk Motz from Konstantin Weiss, this beautiful watch. Obviously, some people have commented and noticed my trusty old Rolex Submariner that I've had for the last 35 years. But this is a beautiful piece, and he actually, he's made the face out of recycled Lamborghini Espada, a car very close to my heart. So I do just want to say a huge thank you to Dirk. I look forward to wearing that very much. Well, the car's come in for a petrol leak from the fuel injection pipes, which we're going to have to get. Also, it's running on 5 cylinders, not 6. And I know from experience that these engines actually eat spark plugs if they're started and shunted round and stopped again. So I'm going to find out very easily with this. The days of doing this on the exhaust manifolds, fortunately, have long since gone. And we can just use one of these whizzy little temperature gauges to see which exhaust manifold stem coming out of the cylinder head is coolest. It is only 1 cylinder down, so it'll be really easy to identify. And then I'm going to change the plugs anyway, because They're precious metal plugs in these cars, iridium or gold palladium or platinum or whatever, but they just don't last unless the car is started, driven and warmed up, as of course its makers intended it to be. Anything other than that, and the insulation in the spark plugs just breaks down and they actually short out before the spark gets to the business end of the plug at the end, the electrodes. Just a combination of unburnt fuel and things causing problems on the end of the plug. So we're going to do that. We'll see if we can get hold of some fuel injection hoses, and then hopefully the car's going to be on the way to being right. We've started the engine up now. I'm just going to look at all the exhaust outlets, and it's very easy to see which one is not running. It is only down on one cylinder. These are all about 250 degrees Celsius. We're running out of cylinders here. Okay, there it is, number one, 45 degrees C. All the others are much, much hotter than that, so that's easy peasy. It's just fun to find out which pot it is. We'll put a new set of plugs in it, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be back onto 6 pots then. Then we start the business of changing the fuel injection pipes and setting the engine up. Well, fortunately, the fuel injection pipes, even though they only made 400 of these cars, or there or thereabouts, BMW remarkably had a set of injector pipes in stock for the car. It's just a series of 6 flexible plastic pipes, high pressure pipes with connections on the end, and there we are, £500 plus VAT, thank you very much. But it's just amazing, what other car manufacturer would have parts like this in stock for a 1970s car that they only made 400 of? Incredible. All we need to do now is work out how they go, in what order, so that we get them right. But yeah, we'll fit these and hopefully get the engine back into life on all 6 pots and running beautifully. Well, having got the right fuel injection pipes, Marcus has now been fitting the right pipes, but not necessarily in the right order. No, I jest. We've fitted them according to fire order. They follow exactly the routing to the old one. So we'll bleed the system out, we'll start the engine, and hopefully it'll be leak-free. I've then got to tune the engine, balance the air intakes, and there we are. We should have a sweet BMW M1. Well, the grille is an obvious example of BMW's less is more philosophy, this beautiful kidney grille arrangement at the front. A philosophy that they still adhere to today, the less is more grille design. But it really does set this car off beautifully. And as I mentioned, this is the original paintwork from 1978. It's a little bit crazed in places, but still beautifully original and reflects this car's 20,000 kilometers from new. We put a new set of plugs in now. She is back on 6 pots, which is great. Before we put the air filter and trunking back on, I'm going to balance the inlet tracts to make sure that the engine is idling. These engines do actually idle in spite of their sort of relatively high tech for a road car use at the time, such as 4 valves per cylinder and fuel injection, and not common in the 1970s particularly. They do still idle quite smoothly. So I'm going to make sure that that's doing that, then we can put it all back together, and then we'll take it out on the road and give it a run. Well, we've got this far. The fuel injection pipes are on, system's bled out. I've been along all the throttles and synchronized all those, mixtures set. So I'm going to just try my little party trick. It's a bit ambitious on an engine like this, because this is a fairly highly tuned engine. It's got a reasonably high specific output for a 1970s engine. It's about 78 brake horsepower a litre, 3.5 litre engine, 273 brake horsepower. But we'll see, we'll try. I'm quite happy with the way it's tuned in, actually. So we're going to start it up and I'll see if I can balance a pound coin on the engine. Just get it settled down, carefully avoiding the throttles so we don't lose the coin in the engine. Yes, there we are. Woo! Oh, not bad for 1970s technology. Yes, the important thing, I can't overstress it enough really, with all these cars is to make sure they are thoroughly warmed through before you start driving them in any way other than gently. Just get everything moving, get everything warmed through. Don't let it idle at very low revs on your driveway, because that kills the internals of the engine as well. Just warm it up if you must at about 1500 RPM, something like that. But this car is now lovely. We've got plenty of oil pressure, oil temperatures about a third of a way up the scale. Cooling system is good, and yeah, the car is riding very well, considering this started life as a racing car which was detuned for the road. It's very, very comfortable. There's not much room in here, it has to be said. I wouldn't like to wear a crash helmet as well, but yeah, it's the steering's lovely and direct. Brakes are good. You only have to touch the throttle and it picks up, as you'd imagine with ITBs, as they're called these days, individual throttle bodies. No self-respecting tuned Ford should be without one these days, but in the 1970s very few road cars had individual throttle bodies. Yeah, it's just it drives like a 20,000 kilometer car, a 12,000 mile car. Gearbox is dead easy, clutch isn't particularly heavy. It's really user friendly. As I mentioned earlier, the switch gear in this is very utilitarian. It's out of a BMW 3 or 5 series or 7 series of the period, or 6, the whole range. They all use the same switches, but they're a bit Billy Basic for a supercar, but they do the job and they'd carry on doing the job. But yeah, it's coming together well. Of course, this isn't really what this car was built for, just tinkering around like this. It was built for being driven, and I'm just making sure, because this is the first time I've driven this car, that it's actually behaving itself and I've got enough confidence in it to drive it reasonably quickly. But so far so good, I have to say. It's also remarkably refined, this car. I mean, I'm just speaking at sort of normal voice levels here, and I can actually hear myself think, which is more than you can in some cars. Yeah, it's altogether good. The first time I worked on and drove an BMW M1, it was an orange one, and that was about 1993. So I have worked on a few, but apparently there's only 2 that are currently road registered and street legal in the UK at the moment. This car isn't from the UK, and they were all made left-hand drive, so that was it. But it just absolutely inspires confidence. It's like a little pussycat, this car. The ride is super smooth for a high-performance road car. I mean, 280 brake horsepower and 160 odd miles an hour seems laughable now, but in the day this was right up there with maybe not the likes of the Ferrari Boxer or the Lamborghini Countach, but certainly close to 911 turbo performance for sure. and the engine is pulling cleanly from low revs, which, as I keep saying, is always a good sign that that the engine is in fine fettle. Yeah, it's all good. The BMW really did a good job of making this a road car, turning it from a Group 5 racing car into a road car, and ended up selling 450-ish of them. It's got electric windows, which still work perfectly. Quite quick for a 1970s car. Air conditioning, all the creature comforts really that a car should have, a luxury car should have even then. Clutch is light. Gearbox, it's a ZF gearbox in this, which is a really sweet gear change considering it has to go round the engine and the gearbox is at the back. Yeah, it's just a very good overall package. I'm just starting to pick the speed up a bit now, or not as much the speed, but the engine load and revs. Bring it gently to life, and all good. It's very, very happy. That engine really is remarkably smooth, very tractable. Just for mischief, I'll take it down to very low revs. That's 30 kilometers an hour, about, in fact it's 25 kilometers an hour, which is about 18 miles an hour. I'm in third gear there, and the engine is doing 1400 RPM, and it's still very, very smooth. Just open the throttle a bit, and she's off. No hesitation, no lumpiness, no objections. That fuel injection is doing its job just beautifully. It was very expensive, the Kugelfischer injection, which obviously BMW wanted max performance, and the reason they put the Kugelfischer injection on was because it was, first of all, a racing engine, but they decided to keep it for the road. The later electronic injection systems, the L-Getronic as it was called, that was starting to come in at that time, was cheaper to make. In fact, BMW used it on their later big sixes, and yeah, it works very well when it's right. Again, it's not the cleanest system either. The exhaust emissions weren't fantastic from it, but yeah, I think it's time to open the taps and take it for a blast. Oh yes. Wow. It may only be 280 brake horsepower, but that is just glorious. What a noise as well. Ah, yes. Almost addictive, that. I could quite see you needing your regular fix of BMW M1. Should be available on the NHS. Yeah, what a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I have to say, the BMW M1 I always had down as not a fantastic car until I drove one, first of all in 1992-93. I couldn't believe how well it handled. It just handles fantastically well. Again, it's Gianpaolo Dallara, the genius gentleman that is Gianpaolo Dallara, obviously designed and developed the chassis for BMW for this car while he was working at in consultation with Lamborghini, and it is an Italian job, the chassis of this car, and boy, is it sublime. It just handles beautifully. Beautiful mid-engined weight distribution, all the weight in the middle where it should be. Low polar moment of inertia, no big weight at the front or the back. Just a fantastically balanced car, and it amazed me when I first drove one of these, when I first worked on one, just how beautiful they are to drive. It really is a fabulous car. I can see why they're so collectible, and in a way why they are so cherished and valuable. It really is just a car that you could go touring in. It's not just a car for a 2-hour fix It really is just amazing. I'm just going to take it round some of these bends and just have a bit of fun with it, because it's just really, really, really saying, come on, come on. Beautifully balanced, fantastic precision, it goes exactly where you point it. Oh, just wonderful. There's no snap off oversteer. You can do what you like with them and they stay planted on the road, which is just fantastic. You know, there's a lot of cars, of course, the Porsche 911 is known for it, and the back end can go on them. I mean, the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, the rear suspension was, whilst it was independent, i.e. each wheel was not, suspension was not directly connected to the other per se, it did lead to the wheels adopting some very, very strange angles in relation to the road, which meant you didn't have the full tyre contact patch, and that could happen very quickly, just if the car changed attitude in a fraction of a second. All of a sudden, you, instead of the car being, the tyre being perpendicular to the road, it was off with positive camber, which is not good news. But this car, oh, just wonderful. It's got properly sorted suspension with decent geometry, always keeps the tyres in perfect contact with the road for its era, and the result is just fun, fun, fun. It's quite an interesting mix, this car, because of course it's German funded, German inspired, German engine, German gearbox, but the rest of it is largely Italian, and it's an interesting meld of Italian handling and German firepower, and it's sort of all the controls were designed using BMW components. They're all very easily full to hand here, the heater controls, the air conditioning, even the radio, dare I say it. Everything just is very much, I mean, BMW were starting to go through their wraparound dash phase at this period with the 6 Series and the 7 Series, but this isn't wraparound, but it's just very ergonomically right. There's no as goes with the fact that it was first and foremost a functional race car. It's all very, very organically easy to operate, quite remarkable really, but you've got that wonderful Italian chassis underneath it all, which is a great combination. It's almost like an Audi period Lamborghini, the Aventador or the Huracan. It's a similar sort of concept really, where you have Audi infrastructure to a certain extent, an influence through the Lamborghini range, and yeah, it's not unpleasant. You could drive this car quite a long way and have confidence in it. I would be quite happy to drive this car a long distance now. It just feels bulletproof, which is brilliant. And I'd feel as though the seat's reasonably comfy. The interior is a bit cramped, but I'd feel reasonably confident that I'd get out the other end, still having a pair of arms and legs that I can actually use, and a back. Yeah, it's great. Absolutely wonderful. Love this car. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like, please share, please subscribe, and we'll be back with something else soon.